So chat, without further ado, every boss fight in COD Zombies rank worst to the best. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into the gameplay.
Ranking every Call of Duty Zombies boss.
Every Call of Duty Zombies boss?
Call of Duty Zombies boss fight
No way,
worst to
dude.
best. Boss fights in Zombies started around Black Ops 3, or they became at least a lot more mainstream.
There's no
from
way,
that
chat.
game and then on. And typically in a list like this, I would
Hold up, chat. I'm also gonna fucking turn on the fan, chat. Let's get into this.
only
Let's see it.
include Treyarch boss fights.
Where's the
but
best
I'm actually
boss
gonna be
fight?
including Infinite Warfares as well. I won't be including Infinite
fair.
Exos or World War II, mainly because I couldn't.
Yeah, FXO's first boss fight is such an
play
elbow.
those games, but also
Let me
because
smell that
IW
chair. What
genuinely
it smell
has
like,
some
though?
really good boss
What it
fights that
smell
I think
like?
Treyarch could learn a lot from in future projects and just zombie games in general. And they're really good examples of just how boss fights are structured to begin with.
true.
Also, the parameters that I'm ranking these boss
Chat,
fights are the
are zombie boss fights even that great? When you compare them to Elden Ring, I feel like no zombie boss even equates to one Elden Ring boss fight. You know? A lot of them are great, but I don't think anything has been exceedingly difficult. Maybe Mephistopheles is the only thing that compares.
depth of their
But I mean,
mechanics
including
and how
IW
well-balanced
is very
and rewarding they
important.
are from like a
I think
gameplay
that's a great
perspective
idea.
in terms of like rewarding smart play and stuff like that. Just basic design stuff for boss fights. But yeah, I did take the task to playing every single COD Zombies boss fight. So if you guys wouldn't mind leaving a thumbs up, I worked really hard on this.
Let's
Great.
go,
Subscribe if you're brand
baby.
new, and let's
Ultra
get
shit is the
We're
best
coming in
zombie
at
boss,
the
is what I'm
very
saying.
bottom of this
Yeah,
list
F this
is
boss.
Beast from Beyond.
Beast from Beyond is the worst boss fight ever. I agree. It's so garbage. You can cheese it. It's not fun. It's boring. I agree. This shit sucks.
Scripted boss fight, and everything is wrong about it.
Yeah, this shit
Mechanically, the way
sucks.
the map itself is laid out, the way the enemies work, everything
The
is
way
just
the whole
wrong.
fight
so let me
is,
explain
it sucks.
how this is set up.
Chat, one in the
Obviously,
chat if you've ever
is
done this. Has anyone actually successfully beaten the Beast from Beyond Easter egg? I mean, if you've ever tried to do meth, you're gonna have to. This shit sucks, man. The Easter egg getting up to this sucks. The boss fight sucks. I agree. This
really
thing
a
sucks.
traditional zombies
Beast
boss
from
fight
Beyond is
as
one of the
being
worst
DLC
zombie
4
maps
for
ever
IW.
created.
They decided to bring back the cryptids from Extinction,
meth?
and in theory, I think on paper that is a pretty
Dude,
good idea.
it's
and could
so
work.
bad.
The thing
Every
is
time
with
I've done this
Extinction-
boss fight, I down. It's just because Extinction guys just jump on you. They leap at you from 900 miles away.
The enemy
It's
type
so
are
bad.
obviously not zombies, meaning they
And
move a
doing
lot
this without
faster, they can
director's
teleport,
cut?
there's more
Hell
of them,
no.
but they don't deal as
Look
much
at
damage
this,
as
look at
typical
this.
zombies. The way that the
He's
health system in
one-hit.
Extinction worked and how much damage you take per cryptids was very
disgusting.
complex and intricate, whereas in this Beast from
On
Beyond
solo,
boss fight,
it's
they
unbearable.
just deal the same damage as a regular zombie, but move at like 6x.
Dude, and Phantoms also can do doubled hits like super quick.
the regular
It's
speed.
so
It is
bad.
Absolutely
The
broken.
blue
you have no
cryptids?
choice but to
Hell no,
continually
man.
move around, and especially
Yeah,
if you're
they
playing solo,
suck.
and you're gonna get
And
body
they
blocked by
teleport.
these
Look
big
at this.
player models with these big cryptid
Yeah,
models
you get
a lot,
body
and
blocked.
The fact that they deal the same damage as a zombie.
Look
this is
at
the most
that.
mashy boss fight of my entire life.
Yeah, it's
and
so
not
bad.
only that, there is a
Then the
sequence
blue
in the
rhinos
middle of the
suck.
boss fight where you need to survive for 100
They
seconds. But the
suck.
catch is that it's not a real 100 seconds. Basically, a real life 1 second. Or it takes about 1.25 seconds of
It's
the
not
clock.
even
So
a
once it's 100
zombies
seconds,
boss
you're
fight,
like,
man.
it's
There's
a
no
little over a
zombies
minute
in
and a
this
half
whole
I can do
boss
that.
fight.
And it ends up being
That's
about
so
like 2 minutes
stupid.
more closer to that. Just like everything is wrong. However, I will say I can kind of
Elemental
see
Margot
the
with a Mark
vision
II
of
could be a
what
dope
Infinity
thumb.
Ward
I mean,
was
yeah, dude.
probably going for, or the nugget of the idea that they wanted to execute in this map. But the problem is, again, it's just nothing works in
Yeah.
this boss fight.
I wonder
It's
what you're
not
going to say is the
only incredibly
worst
frustrating,
Treyarch
it's
Zombies
unbalanced
boss
and
fight.
broken.
I'm curious
it's
to
also
hear what
just
that's
not
going to
very
be.
exciting.
Chat, what do you
It's
think is the worst Treyarch zombie boss fight? I'm curious. What do you guys
really
think?
bland facility,
I'm trying to think of it right
running
now.
around it probably like over
Rev?
20 or 30 times in a row.
Rev
just
is one of the
shooting
worst.
Rhinos that are
Maybe
absolute
Rev.
bullet sponges. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to
Shadows?
this
I don't
boss
know.
fight that I really like, and I think given
Blood?
a little more time
Zet?
to develop this
Oh,
one and
maybe
really
Zet.
flesh it out and balance it, it actually could
I mean,
have
we'll
been
see.
pretty good. But a lot of the
Zet's
attention
is pretty
from
bad.
IW was pulled off onto something else, which we'll talk about later.
Termelon
But yeah, this boss fight really got the short end.
I
of the
know,
stick.
dude,
I get
you
the impression
down so
somehow
many
that they
times
were
on
a little
this.
bit pressed for time and
100%,
resources, and this was kind
100%.
of just slapped together. Like, you really get that vibe when you play it, and, you know, again,
Is
I can
Zetsubo's
see the
boss fight
nugget
better
of the
than
idea.
Blood's, though?
It just
I think so.
didn't necessarily
I don't
play
know,
out
maybe I'm
how
wrong.
I'm sure they wanted to, but
Yeah, this
it
boss
was a
fight
unique
sucks
idea nonetheless,
penis.
and it's at least memorable, I'll say that. So
Yeah.
coming up just after that is Firebase Z. And there's some-
Actually, I agree, dude. Firebase Z is not even a boss fight. It's just shoot this one big guy for 5 seconds. Hey, I agree. It's honestly one of the worst boss fights.
Reason
Fair.
I'm starting
That's
this
a W,
clip
dude.
at the cutscene.
I
of this
totally
map.
forgot.
This boss
And chat,
fight-
the fact that nobody said Firebase Z proves that's the worst boss fight. Because it's so bad that you don't even remember.
Listen, if I can do a boss fight in under 20 seconds under any circumstance, it's probably not a very good boss fight in most cases. And Firebase Firebase Z
true.
is basically the
Chat,
epitome of that.
has anyone ever failed this boss fight? I don't think anyone has failed this boss fight ever, which it makes it probably the worst boss fight.
The only reason I'm ranking it a little bit higher than Beast and Beyond is this boss fight is actually functional, right? The mechanics make sense.
I mean, it works.
There is
an
actual boss that, you know, isn't
Dude, look at the health.
It's just unbelievably easy to
especially
kill
with
and cheese,
Ring, dude.
and it's
Look
not very
at
exciting
this.
either. You basically just have a wall that you need to deal damage towards. It's the same enemy as what we've already encountered.
Dude, what a boss,
nothing
bro.
too crazy or extraordinary there.
I mean, round 100 mimics are harder to kill than the Order.
Just very, like
what
low
the
tier.
hell?
This boss fight could have been much better with a few small tweaks. Give
I
the
agree.
Orda
It
a
looks
lot more
cool,
health, make
though.
it significantly harder to kill. Maybe make him move around a little bit and have some
Dude, you just
variation in depth of his
deleted
attacks.
him.
Other than that, there
This
really
Ring of
isn't too
Fire
much to say
just
about Firebase
deletes
Z.
him.
It's a very low tier boss fight, and
Yeah,
maybe
Al,
this was a
Firebase
time constraint
Z
thing. I'm not
has
really sure.
such
Either
a
way, it doesn't
bad
really
boss
matter. One of
fight.
the weakest boss fights in Cold War and zombies in
I
general.
mean, dude,
Next
I'm
up,
totally
just after
fair.
that is the second
Fair.
outbreak.
Second Outbreak Easter egg with another Orda. Dude, it's wild that this Orda is even better than the one on Firebase
Easter egg
Z.
boss fight, and this
How is this one
already
better?
a step above Firebase Z, which ironically
This is the
actually
same
has
boss.
the exact same boss. It's another Orda, but this one's different. Not only
Wow, that
because
shows how
the
bad
mechanics are
Firebase
more
is.
depth, there's a ticking clock element, which means you need to beat the boss fight in
I mean,
under
true,
5
it's
minutes and
more-
30
it's more
seconds.
hectic.
The Orda, in contrast to Firebase Z, can
It
actually
feels
move
bigger,
around this
too.
time. It
Yeah.
throws up more attacks.
It's definitely
and
harder.
It also has
You
a
can
mechanic
fail
that
it.
it can heal itself if you get too
Yeah.
far away from it, or if you.
I almost
don't
failed this
deal
boss fight
damage
the
in a
first time
long
I did
enough
it,
amount
so
of
I can
time.
understand
So,
that.
and plus the enemy spawns are
Hey,
much
what's up, Ray?
heavier.
How
It's
you
a
doing?
lot more intense, and it's
How
very
you doing, bro?
sandboxy. I'm actually like, I'm not the biggest fan of this boss fight. It's not great in comparison,
okay.
but it's like passable, right? It's
I mean, I
still pretty
agree.
low
It's
tier,
definitely-
but you know,
it's
it's at
definitely
least
pretty
not
shit.
embarrassing as a boss fight.
Firebase
Realistically,
L.
the only way I would
Yeah.
look to improve this boss
Ron and
fight
I
is
did
to
Firebase
make
Z
the
boys.
main
One in the chat if you remember
antagonist or
watching
the main
that. That
enemy
was so
not
funny.
Orda. Not only have we
But
already
dude,
fought it in Firebase
Firebase
Z, you literally
is better
encounter the
or
exact
is
same
worse than
Ordas
this,
just
which is
as
wild.
you're playing the game in world events.
That
So
was
it
such
takes a
an
lot
L,
of the
dude.
weight away from that, and makes it feel less special. And
So
even just a
sad.
different kind of enemy doesn't have to go too crazy or anything, but could really
I
at
do
least
agree.
help it set apart.
Chat, does Cold War have some of the worst bosses? It's sad. Two of the worst ones are in Cold War here.
As an
I think it
identity for the
does.
second Outbreak Easter
It
egg.
does have
I
some of
didn't
the worst
expect
bosses.
too much out of this to begin with, but you know, it's about what I expected it to
But
be.
it also
which
has
is
Legion,
an
though,
adequate
which is
boss fight,
interesting
but
to me, 'cause
nothing
Legion is
very
good.
special or
Yeah.
even that memorable. It's okay.
I would say
Next up
Legion's
is
one of the better
Zetsubo
ones.
no Shima, and you could
Ah,
say this
fair.
map actually has two separate boss
Fair.
fights. One
I
of them
like the
being
spider,
the
though.
Mother Spider, which is a more mid-game boss
Yeah,
fight.
I think
which is a
including
pretty cool
them is
concept.
fine.
They really
They're basically the
introduced that
same
with
thing.
this map, and I think they could go a lot further with that going forward into future projects, and it's a really good idea. The
Orda's
fight itself
Morbius?
isn't
I
incredibly
agree, dude.
complicated. You just have to deal damage to the spider. It takes, you know,
Yeah,
around
Zetsubo's
30
fun,
seconds
though.
or so. It's
I like
very
the bosses
simple,
on
but
Zetsubo.
it's
They're
effective.
just
Now,
fun.
the problem is the main boss fight itself against Takio in the prison cell
just a time
is
base.
very underwhelming, and
Yeah.
it's kind of just boring. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not implying that every single boss fight has to be like over-the-top exciting and bombastic stuff like that,
I mean,
but
true.
at least it
At least be
needs
a little
to
bit
feel
something.
like a boss fight, or for
Chat,
the boss
why has there never been a parkour-based boss fight? Like, Revelations could have literally had that. There's a parkour section, but like, dude, add it in the fight, man. Destiny 2 does a lot of that with raids. It would have been
itself to have
so
a
good
presence.
on this
It's
map.
one of my main problems with boss
Or
fights
Rev
is when
or anything,
the
dude.
actual main enemy isn't that much of a threat, and it really feels like that in Zetsubo no Shima. It's the most unexciting boss fight I think you could possibly make. Not only do
I
you
agree.
really not have to kill anything in here if you don't want to, you pretty much just wait it out for these
Chat, has anyone failed the Zetsubo boss fight? Yes or no?
vulnerable positions to open up.
I've failed
so you
it
could shoot
before.
it with one bullet of one
But
weapon,
probably
and you
less
do that
than
4
Rev.
times, and the actual main boss has one attack.
I failed it, but
That's
not because of
practically
Takio,
it. Other
just
than that, you
the
just
Thrashers
avoid
one-hitting.
thrashers and spiders, which I don't like for my own personal reasons.
Forgot a
They're
gas
not
mask? I mean,
particularly
that's
fun
fair.
enemies. I feel like you take a lot of undeserved and like just random damage from these, and I don't know. It's just not that good. I really feel like Zetsubo's boss fight is the Firebase Z of Black Ops 3.
That's
And
so
not to apply
true.
any
That is
amount
so
of quality
true.
on not only the map itself, but the main Easter
I mean,
eggs,
I
but just
love
the boss
Zetsubo
fight in
way
a
more
bubble
than Firebase,
is
though.
one of, it's probably
Way
the weakest
more.
boss fight in Black Ops 3, which with a few tune-ups and some changes could have been significantly better. Was it going to be one of the best? I highly doubt it, but it could have been made much better with a few small changes. Coming up just after that is Dead of the Night, and this is the
really?
best zombies map of all time.
I think I have to disagree with this
Naruto
one.
and Black Ops
I have to disagree with this one just because of the fact I think Rev is at least worse than this.
werewolf boss fight. I played this very recently
I
when
don't
trying to record this
think
video, just so I have the
this
most
one's that
clear-headed
bad.
opinion of this.
I thought this one was fun on solo. It's pretty fun on solo. It's not that great co-op though. It's pretty easy just because everyone can just be at a light.
I feel like
So I
this
could
boss
agree.
fight, just more endemic of the map, is it's got the problem of a really good atmosphere and vibe,
best
but
zombies map
not
of all time.
super solid gameplay to back
Kino
it up.
Naruto
And this
and Black
boss
Ops
fight
1.
is
I don't
not
think
bad.
it's that
Don't get me wrong,
bad.
by any means, it's
I
not a
definitely
bad
don't
boss
think
fight,
it's
but I
that
think
bad.
it is pretty mediocre compared to a lot of them. The mechanics aren't incredible.
Dude, chat, I like this boss fight more than Alpha Omega. Like, I think Alpha Omega's boss fight is garbage. I think it's bad. Like, Alpha Omega's boss fight, I think, is worse than this.
Complicated, and the main boss itself isn't that much of a threat, all things considered. And it's,
But, I
in
mean,
fact,
it's a fair
invisible
pick.
for most of the
It's
boss
a fair
fight.
pick.
You essentially do a few phases where you turn these statues to
Chop
face
one
a
time
certain
that he won't
tile,
let his
and
kids play
when
Dead
they're
of
all
the Night.
facing it, the werewolf
Dude,
will
my friends
hurt
are
you,
Dead of the
and
Night
once it
haters,
enters
dude.
that ring, obviously,
F's in the
then
chat.
it will become visible and vulnerable, and you can attack it. And you do that a couple of times. It's mediocre. It's
It's
passable.
definitely not a
Because the
great boss
itself
fight,
is
this one, for
invisible
sure.
For 90%
I agree
of
with
the
that.
fight. Sometimes you kind of forget that's what you're fighting. Like, it's
True,
more of
true.
a fight against the
I mean, I
just
can understand
regular
that.
zombies in the map than it is against the werewolf itself. Like, he might attack you every once in a while while he's invisible, and you'll be like, oh, I just took damage. I guess this thing still exists. But I don't know. It's like not a great like presence in the map itself.
Yeah.
It's again very mediocre, passable boss fight. Not one of their best examples of good fights. Certainly not one of the worst.
Imagine, chat, and this was supposed to be the first Chaos map, and the boss fight is literally in the top 5 worst. Like, dude, what an L, man. What an
and
L.
is very, very
What
mid-tier,
an
I
L.
would say. After that, however, is going to be Shaolin
Oh,
Shuffle,
true.
which
F this boss fight. Honestly, dude, I think there are some worse Treyarch ones like Alpha Omega and Rev, for sure, but I'm not sure if he's including Rev. This Shaolin boss fight, though, sucks dick. It's not fun.
Bubble again, I really do like as a fight, but and I could really see
You just
the
need
vision of what
certain
they were going
aspects
for
of this
with the
boss
Rat
fight.
King in this kind
I
of
don't
circumstance,
like
but
this
I think
boss.
this boss fight was a little bit fumbled in execution. You
I
are
agree.
fighting the Rat King in the lower sewers, and
F
you have 3
this
different
step,
challenges
dude.
that you have to do before you can really deal damage to the actual Rat King.
Chaos saved me
me
before, but
you out
the
and assist you.
storyline
And I'm pretty sure
sucks.
if you're playing the actual Easter egg version of this rather than the boss battle mode, Pam Grier will pretty much infinitely revive you in solo.
Fuck Pam Grier. No, she doesn't.
Possible to fail, but you have
It is possible to
a couple of them
fail.
include you, like, shooting
I've
zombies
died
to
multiple
kill these
times,
area
dude.
of effect pools
Chat, can I get an F in the chat for Pam? She fucked me over so many times in this map,
that are
bro.
these little green
Fuck
sludge
that
marks on the
bitch,
ground.
dude.
One of the challenges
She's
you have
so
to find these
buggy.
like icons around the map that you
She's
can only
so
see with a
glitchy,
certain
man.
vision tool, and that's again really cool stuff. I think the ideas were very neat, and then after doing all 3 of those challenges and objectives,
The Rev hate is corny? What do you mean, dude? The boss fight is literally the exact same one from Shadows of Evil.
can you really deal damage to the boss? But the Rat King itself,
It's
again,
not even a
isn't
fight.
major threat. There's not a whole lot he can do to you
There's
outside
no
of
fight.
the
He doesn't
zombies.
put up a
And
fight.
Again, they
It's a
end up being more of a
boss.
threat than anything. The challenges are kind of silly or goofy. They're
DJ
not
Oz
that
was
great
better
in my
than Rev.
opinion, but
I
they're
agree.
passable and they're fine. It's a fun fight, not one of my
Pam
favorite.
can
though.
suck
Next
my
up though
pinky,
is
though.
going to be Revelations on Black
Wow.
Ops 3. This one
I'm shocked that this one is above Dead of the Night. Do you guys think that this is worse or better than Dead of the Night?
I honestly I quite like it, and it's split up into 2 boss fights.
I do like
which
the Margwas.
ironically,
The Margwa
first
part is
of the
cool.
boss fight
So, I mean,
is
just for
actually
that,
way
I
better than the
understand why you
finale,
put it
but
above it.
Essentially, the first part of the boss fight brings you to this room, and you fight
I
off
can
4
understand
different
that.
waves and sequences of Margwas that all have like a different attribute.
It's literally
applied to the room.
SOE.
So, for
I
example, you
agree.
can have
I
the
agree.
anti-gravity
It's SOE with more
jumping
Margwas.
around all over the place. You
Kino
can have
Naruto and
other
Black Ops 1.
obstacles and like sort of hazards in the room that can kill you as well. But you just have to kill 4 waves of Margwas, and then you go back into the room for the
Yeah.
finale, in which you basically just charge the summoning key with souls. So you have to get a few kills. You throw
why
it
does
into the
Rev's
Sophia
boss
Ghost,
fight
and it shoots
suck
the
so
laser.
much
It's basically the
dick?
Shadows of Evil boss fight, but a little bit dumbed down in my
I
opinion.
hate
This
it.
one can also
I
be done
hate it.
fairly quickly as well, depending on how efficient.
Honestly, I think Rev is should be worse just because of the fact that like it was such a hype thing for this boss fight to be just spectacular, and it was just Shadows of Evil again. Yeah, the build up I think
like,
definitely
freebie,
makes it worse.
If you know
at
what
least
you're doing,
for
you're
me.
optimizing. This boss fight is not only significantly easier than like the midway boss fight in Revelations, but is probably one of the easiest boss fights in general. Now, actually,
I agree.
there is a theory that this was meant to be really easy, as basically the way they were taking the story. The Shadow Man wasn't exactly supposed to be dead from this boss fight. It was supposed to feel like it was unearned.
I know, but chat, this should have been the Great War map. This should have been the Great War map, dude. 100%. This should have been the best boss fight in all of Zombies. It really should have been, dude.
But it's not one of my favorite boss
so
fights.
Disappointing.
Okay.
So
Coming up just
disappointing.
above that is going to be Blood of the Dead.
Hey, there's
Black
Blood
Ops
of the
4.
Dead.
So this one was honestly more or less.
I'm expecting Alpha Omega soon
in
too.
comparison to what this could have been. I really do think this would have it was a bit of a missed opportunity to at least not have this boss fight take place on like the Golden Gate Bridge or something like that. An absolutely iconic piece of regular Mob of the Dead that just doesn't really make an appearance in Blood, and it's a little bit of a shame. That aside, though, the actual boss fight itself.
Chad, does anyone like this boss?
I tend to not like maps that.
I hate this boss. I don't think it's fun at all. I think it's really boring.
Slightly larger version of the mini boss that we've already seen as we're going about our business playing it, and I'm sure a lot of you guys share that similar sentiment. It's
but the fight itself
is really boring. It takes a little bit away
boring.
from the surprise, from the grandiosity, and I think Blood of the Dead is literally just an extra large Brutus, and it's not that exciting in all honesty. Like the coolest part is the fact that whoever's playing Richtofen has
42
to get in the
spawn
machine at the end of it,
locations,
or like,
dude. That's why I'm playing for the boss.
Solo. That stuff's kind of cool. That's really neat. I won't lie. But another detrimental thing to this boss fight is, and this is a lot of BO4 fights in general, you actually need the zombie shield in order to, progress through this one,
dude.
as you have to
shield
charge up
gameplay,
the main,
Resident Sleeper.
The center
Put
console.
Me down,
but if
bro.
your shield breaks for any reason whatsoever and you don't have a way to replace it through elixirs, you cannot continue the boss fight.
Yeah,
in
I know.
my
it's
opinion,
just
that
done.
is bad game design. Now, luckily,
I agree.
Your shield doesn't break that often in
fun to
BO4
play
unless you
like
make a
that.
terrible, tremendous mistake. But if you're playing solo, you've got like one shot at it, and if your shield breaks,
Can your shield break in the boss? Yes.
You're kind of screwed, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I think
you literally need to run like mega elixirs, like Carpenter or something, to refill your shield, or else you're fucked. It's literally one of the dumbest fights.
Follow you around.
I also died in this fight because all I had was the Helion salvo at round 100, and I didn't have PhD, and I was shooting it at his orbs, and I just died just because of explosive damage. And you have to be in his circle, so you have to take his damage. It's such a poorly designed boss fight. So bad.
To, like, read and react
so
to as you're
bad.
Doing the typical, devices that you go up doing this fight and charging up the orbs and stuff like that, alongside dodging this mega.
What is the best gun in BO4? The Helion salvo. But it sucks on this boss fight.
But I think it needs
unless you have PhD.
Coming up next is going to be D Machine's boss fight on Cold War Zombies. This was
chat. Agree or disagree? Orlov? Dang.
Disc map in the first boss fight.
I mean, I guess it's not really a boss.
No, well, this isn't the most.
It's more of a protection.
Or even difficult boss fight in the world. I do like the formula switch up where you kind of think you're going to be fighting.
I mean, it's a fair placement.
Protecting him while he
goes really and takes down
3 different generators, and that's a pretty interesting flip on the concept of.
Chat, like literally, this is just Origins. This is the Origins boss fight, literally.
And for that, I'll give it credit. My only real problem with this boss fight is that the stakes are almost zero in terms of the actual fight itself. Orlov cannot die in the current build of the game, which I'm probably pretty sure in development of this, they actually had Orlov have a health bar and he could die if he got, swarmed by too many zombies.
Why do they not keep that?
Perhaps this was deemed to be difficult for newer players that were being onboarded during Cold War. It's exactly how some of the objectives in Outbreak work, where you have to defend a certain location or an object that actually can take damage, and if it dies or if it breaks, your game will completely fail. So I assume in early development of they actually made
this
it so
video
Orlov could
is
take
making
damage.
me realize how Cold War has just such bad bosses.
And if he died,
it makes me kind of
result
sad.
In the failure of the boss fight, but
like Legion was the only good one.
That's my biggest criticism of it. But
and Mauer had a good one too.
And the boss fight arena
I don't like
itself
Forsaken's
is
boss,
laid
to be
out
honest.
pretty well, and it just flows nicely. So not the greatest boss fight in the world, but it's definitely
passable. Trap for Cold War.
Cold
War be dying out here.
Up next, we have Alpha Omega on Black Ops 4 Zombies.
I mean, honestly, I respect you putting Alpha Omega up here just because of the fact that it's like it is a different boss fight, but dude, it's still just so boring.
Biggest fan of the map
so
itself, and it's pretty obvious.
Dude.
This was roughly the point. In
Dead
which
Ops Arcade isn't in
have,
this video.
The ramifications
I would
of
include
their
Dead
big
Ops
budget
though,
cuts
if
around
I
this
did
time.
one.
Alpha Omega was
Dead
supposed
Ops
to be a lot more than it was, but at least the boss fight in and of itself is relatively good fun, and it's intact. packed. It's not too complicated, and it involves you fighting the Avogadro that featured or at least debuted in Black Ops 2 Zombies.
Yeah,
he pretty much follows you around.
I just
the
hate this
underground
boss.
Newtown bunker
Chat,
facility.
rate this boss out of 10.
These, like, 4
I give it like a
generators, and you're
3.
locked in to these
I actually
different
think it's
sections
that
of the
boring.
bunker, which you have to collect, like, I
don't
think
like
it's
it.
30 or 50
I
souls, something
do
like
not
that.
like this
But the neat
fight.
little twist on this boss fight is you actually don't fight any zombies at all. You fight the ADM units or the mannequins that are infamous on
I mean, the
Nuketown.
lore is
And that
cool,
is,
but I
a
just
subtle
don't
touch,
like
but
this map.
they're stronger than the average zombie, and it makes the boss fight feel a lot more intense than it probably would be with just, regular zombies.
Yeah,
in and
I
of
agree
itself.
with that.
The Avogadro also has a few different attacks that are relatively easy to read, and he's not like a massive presence in the boss fight.
There's no
as you
room
fill
in
up
the
souls,
bunker.
But other than that, it's your average like soul box
I
boss
hate
fight
this
where you
boss.
just fill up 4 different ones, and then you do have one unique step at the end of the boss fight where you have the Avogadro in the APD that he spawned, and you actually have to push him back in there. And while it's a little goofy in execution,
look at this,
it's a really
dude.
neat idea, and
Look
the
at
step
his
itself is kind of
stance.
fun to do, and like the
He looks
scuff
so
mechanics
dumb.
kind of remind me of how the Avogadro originally
just
functioned
so
and felt like
dumb.
in Black Ops 2 Zombies. So it's a nice little homage
I
to
hate
that,
that.
whether they
That
intended
looks
it
so
to be or
bad.
not. But otherwise, pretty cool boss fight. Not a great cutscene, but a decent setup nonetheless. Next up, we have Shadows of Evil's boss fight on Black Ops 3.
Can you imagine that Shadows of Evil made a better boss fight than the whole end of the fucking game? That is the biggest L I've ever heard. And it's so sad to even say that.
And you might ask
Shadows
yourself,
of Evil was
pretty
better
similar
than
to the
Rev.
Revelations boss fight.
It was
but
better.
I think Shadows of Evil, while it technically can be done
so
pretty quickly if
sad.
you're efficient and you know what you're doing, this boss fight can be one of the most difficult.
It can
boss
be very
fights
challenging.
if you
Yeah.
mess up a few times.
I agree.
Because every time you mess up a sequence, another Margot will spawn in.
Yeah,
Not
it can
only
be very
that,
difficult.
but the room itself and the actual layout makes this boss fight more difficult than the
True,
Revelations build because of the wall running
and the
mechanic.
wall
You
running.
pretty much
Yeah.
only have half the map to work with at any given time, and also
Yeah,
the Shadow Man moves
that's
around a
very
lot
true.
more erratically in
Oh
this
my
one.
gosh,
Now,
how's he gonna
interestingly,
do this?
The more sequences you fail in this boss fight,
he's
the
gonna do
longer
it.
it takes for the Shadow Man to
Hey,
reset himself
wow,
back
I'm
in
shocked
shield.
he got
So
that.
It gives you more of a mercy
Wow.
window every time you mess up, but other than that, it's just like a really good, fun boss fight. It can be completely cheesy.
I mean, chat,
depending
do you
on
guys
what
think Shadows' boss fight is better than Rev? One in the chat if yes, two in the chat if no. I
run,
think
but
so.
if you really want to give
It's
yourself
more,
a challenge,
it's
the
definitely
Shadows of Evil
more
boss fight
exhilarating.
really
With the
low-powered
Shadows
guns
music as
is
well.
unironically a
I
really
think it's
difficult
better.
time. So
Yeah.
pretty good. The step after it can only be done co-op for the most part, but the
Unless
boss
you got
fight
that solo
itself is
mod
very
on like
neat.
this.
Rave in the Redwoods, which was Infinite Warfare's DLC 1 map. Now
I like this boss. I think we're getting now into the better bosses. I do like this boss.
Strongest example.
Definitely
of a
not
really
the
good
best
fight,
boss, though,
But
no.
in terms of other
It's a good
fights
boss,
and
though.
what
It's
you could
fun.
compare it to, this one is really good, and the design is pretty ingenious.
Chat,
So
one in the chat if you've
basically,
done
you're
this one.
fighting the Kevin
It's a fun
Smith
one,
version
man.
of
The Easter egg
Super Slasher,
here is
and
really
in
easy,
this,
too.
You are
Doesn't
in
take
Rave
too long
mode
to
as
get
you
it.
collect souls on 2 different locations, and it takes honestly quite a lot of them. But you fill both of them up to make this ring in which you.
It's
have to
literally
lure
like the
Super
mid
Slasher
boss.
into.
I agree.
You
It's
then,
not bad, it's
fire
not
on him when
great.
he's in the ring,
It's right
and
in
that'll
the
bring him
middle.
back, pull him into the real world. However,
Yeah.
he still has a shield, and it's represented by these small little icons that'll pop up all over his body that you have to shoot down. There's like 10 or 15 of them, and this boss fight is pretty
Rave should
long.
be
You have to
higher?
do a few sequences
Nah,
of this.
I mean, this
And if you're
boss
playing
is
efficiently, this
very
boss fight will
simple.
take you probably anywhere from 12
It's still
to
a long
15
boss
minutes,
fight,
maybe
though.
even 20 minutes.
Yeah,
if
it's
you're
a
playing
long
slowly.
boss
So
fight.
it's not something you can just completely bypass and blow through, even if you're good at it. Like, it's going to take you a long time.
It's just,
no matter
there's so
what.
many
And the sequences
animations and
themselves
stuff.
are all very like distinct. You know what step you got to do next once you get a feel for it, and it's pretty difficult. Now, I will say, my
Found a
only
Rank Next?
criticism
No,
is that
this
the
is
Super
only
Slasher
including
itself
IW.
isn't
No
that
World War
much of a
II, no
threat. Like,
Exos.
it looks like his attacks are going to do a lot of damage or even insta-kill you, but they don't do a whole
That's
lot.
so
The zombies
true.
end
He
up
doesn't
being
actually
more
do a lot
threat
of
than
damage.
Actually, the main boss, which is a little bit disappointing,
Yeah,
but I
that is
really
true.
think they made him overpowered. This boss fight could easily be potentially too hard for the average player, so they made him
that's fair.
more of a visual threat than anything, but he's still nothing to scoff at. Coming up just after that is going to be Ancient
Hey,
Evil. And for
dude,
the most
look
part,
at this
I really
gameplay.
like this boss fight, and
That's
the
so
concept
funny.
is neat, and the location
Ancient Evil
is
boss,
probably one of
yeah.
my favorite, but I'm not in love with
I
the
think it's
layout,
not that
nor
great
am I
either.
in love with the way it kind of forces you to
I
play.
agree.
So you're essentially fighting
Chat,
Pegasus
agree
for
or
the most
disagree
part,
with this
where
pick?
you-
I think
you
I
come
agree.
around, he
It is
flies,
kind
you
of
have to
like
shoot him out of the sky,
mid-tier,
and
I
you
think.
basically have to use the Hellion Salvo, which for all Black Ops
True,
4's
you do
intent,
need
kind of
Helion.
making you giving you the freedom to play how you want to play. You're not given that many options when it comes to this.
I mean, that
boss
just
fight,
was an
and the way
illusion
that
in
you
this
actually
game.
deal damage to Pegasus can really only be done through a specialist weapon as well. But other than that, the boss fight
Specialist
itself is
gameplay,
pretty fun,
baby.
and it's very, very unique. Very
Yeah,
rarely
it
are
is
we
unique.
ever
It is
fighting
true.
some kind of aerial enemy in zombies, and maybe that's not something
I mean,
want
that
all
is
the
true.
time, but for Ancient
Other than
Evil, this was a
GK.
really good mix-up, and another problem I guess
Chat,
I
is
have
Meth
with this
gonna be
one
number
is the
one?
fact
I
that
think so
the
too.
Boss fight arenas,
But I
there's
think
basically
Legion is
3
gonna be
different
very high
platforms,
on
and you
Chop's
get less
list.
and less space to work with as the
What do you
fight
think is on
goes
the top?
which sometimes that can lead to intensity, but sometimes that can also just be
Legion,
rather annoying. And especially in
Mephistopheles,
BO4, sometimes you can get max ammo
maybe
and other drops
some
to spawn
Black
on
Ops
areas
3 or
of the map
Black Ops
that you
4
can't
ones,
even
like
access,
the
which
9 Elephant.
is a little bit
we'll
of a
see.
design flaw in this fight, but other than that, it
DE?
is fairly fun.
I don't know,
Rave of
maybe not
Despair
the
that
top.
is a
Oh,
boss fight that
9
could have
Elephant right
been-
here.
It is really good, don't get me wrong, but
Damn.
it could have been much better, and this is going to be Black Ops 4's
I mean, I respect
9
this
boss
pick.
fight. So
I love the 9 boss fight. For me, I don't know why, it's one of my favorites, but I think a lot of people don't like it as
in
much
terms of
as I
like
do.
visuals, I'm going to give this 10 out of 10.
Yeah, the
5
visuals
stars.
is,
It
I think, what
amazing
makes
in
it
terms of
so
like a visual spectacle.
great.
Gameplay, however, is lacking a little bit. The
best
problem
zombies
is
map of all
it's
time.
basically all bark,
Keynote
no
or Total
bite.
Black
You have the
Ops.
visual
Yeah.
of like seemingly thousands of gladiators running out of the gates at once.
I
They're not
agree.
that
It could
hard
have
to kill,
been
and they
more.
can be
I do have to blame BO4's engine though for this boss fight, because a lot of what made this boss fight bad in the beginning as well was BO4's engine. So it's like, dude, again, if this shit was on BO3,
wiped out like the regular
still be
zombies.
better,
sometimes, if
man.
not
It would be
even
better.
easier. And then you have the 2 large elephants that come out as being the main boss. And again,
Yeah, the
visual
elephants are sick,
spectacle,
though.
but in
Love
reality, they're not that much.
How
of a
many
threat,
dads
and
do
they
you
can
guys
be
have,
taken
chat?
out-
I have
they can
9.
be taken out
9
absurdly
dabs.
easy. And since there's 2 of them, they had the opportunity, I guess, to reveal like a different kind of enemy. And I know at Treyarch, they were actually toying with a couple of different types of enemies that weren't elephants that were going to come out of these gates. But they
Really?
ultimately ended up going with these.
Huh.
They
I wonder
had
what they
the
were gonna do.
opportunity to just, reveal something else crazy that would come out and potentially
they
something
could have
late.
explained why the fuck this map is called 9. Does any human being on this planet understand why this map is called 9?
Harder, but it's
We do not
basically
know.
just the exact
We do
same
not know.
elephant that came out of the first gate, which is just
I
as
mean,
easy to kill as the one
we
before.
really do not
so it
know
feels
why
a
this
little
map is
repetitive.
called
It
mine.
doesn't feel like it builds up to anything besides the
Chat,
elephants
anybody have the
themselves.
answer?
Again, all
Because there are
visual
9
spectacle,
zombies,
but the
dude.
gameplay
I mean, that's
elements
right,
are
bro.
severely lacking. The boss fight arena itself is also it's a lot bigger than it probably should be for the intensity
9
that
people
you
played
maybe
it,
wanna
boys.
feel.
Let's go.
Up next is going to be DLC 4 on Cold
Hey,
War Zombie.
I respect the shade at the Forsaken boss. I think it's sad to say that this boss is better than the Revelations boss. Chat, isn't that the saddest thing to say? Cold War's final boss was better than the villain of Ether. That is
Forsaken.
such an
And
L.
in this boss fight, you
Such
literally
an
fight
L.
the Forsaken himself, and for all it's led up to be, again,
Such
same
an
problem
L.
as 9, amazing visual spectacle, and I think that's its strongest suit, but the
I
gameplay
agree.
feels somewhat lacking and hollow in this fight. Now, I
Yeah,
do think
the gameplay
this
is
is
really boring.
probably the, I guess, vision they may have had for Firebase Z's boss fight, something along these lines, and it
Ooh,
is a lot
interesting,
more
true.
complex and intricate than that fight. Is it amazing? Not exactly,
Man,
but it's
this
a
should have
step
been
in the right
Firebase
direction
Z's
for
boss fight. I
Cold War
agree.
Zombies boss fights, and for Treyarch boss fights in general. There's not a whole lot to say about it. It's
I mean,
pretty
I agree
straightforward.
with
You just
that.
have to break the Forsaken shields and then shoot it with some,
Chat, do we have Foreskin lovers in the chat? Like, because I think I shit on this map a lot more. But, dude, Forsaken, any map from Cold War that starts with an F, Forsaken and Firebase Z, to me, they're just
actual
kind of
turrets
mid.
after filling up.
I'm liking
one
them a
simple
lot
soul
less
box. You
than
do
I
that a
used
couple
to.
of times. Nothing too crazy, and the boss fight itself, or like
The
the
water
actual
weapon's
enemy,
great.
doesn't feel like
The
that much of a
bosses,
threat
though,
for
are
the most
kinda
part. There isn't a whole lot he can
not
do to
that
you if you're
great.
paying attention. So it is what it is. Again,
I feel like the
visual spectacle's
Abomination on this
amazing,
map
but the
is more of a
gameplay
threat
does
than
ring
this
hollow
boss.
every time I play
You
it.
know?
But again, step in the right direction, and I hope they continue to iterate on stuff like this. Coming up next, though, is a weird one. It's definitely not the best boss fight, but it may be the
Interesting.
most interesting one on this list. So this is Attack of the Radioactive.
It's like one of the only bosses that use parkour. Chat, agree or
thing
disagree?
on
I
Infinite
love,
Warfare.
I
And
do like this
I cannot
boss.
stand to play
I think it's
the Easter egg on this map.
the Easter
but
egg
the boss
sucks.
fight, I will
The
play
boss is
again
fun.
and again. So
Boss
this
is
is
fun.
fighting Krogzilla, and it's basically the exact opposite problem
such
of
a unique
9
boss
and
fight.
Forsaken. The visuals on this boss fight are terrible. Literally
Yeah.
look straight
But
out
the
of a
mechanics are
PS2
great.
game. I don't
Yeah.
know if they were intentionally going for something a lot more sloppy looking to fit into the theme and the aesthetic of the map. I'm
We
not really
will
sure,
never
but
know.
it doesn't look good from a visual perspective.
this
but
map
that's
still
fine
looks
because
bad.
the gameplay is pretty
Even on
stellar. It's got
PC.
a bunch of different unique phases in which you have to ship a bomb down from the top to the bottom of the beach to get the bomb in Krogzilla's mouth. Getting it down to the beach is difficult because because there's an
Chad, you guys
onslaught,
like this map?
absolute
Is it a W boss or an L
barrage
boss?
of
I don't
meteors
know.
and krogs and stuff like that. You then have to shoot a vulnerable
good
spot
boss.
with these
I think it's
random
unique.
turrets around the map.
It's one of my favorite bosses for
in
my
its
W,
weak
I'd
point as
say.
it tries to shoot you with a laser. And after you've done that, you
Still
then
better
get
than
pushed
Rev,
to
though.
the back of the beach where you started, and you then have to avoid not only a sequence of zombies and a relentless onslaught of a couple of waves of more meteors and krogs, but then the real fun begins. When it comes time to
dude, the
approach
parkour
Krogzilla
step,
and you survive
I love
all
this
of those
step, though. It's
sequences,
so much
he's
fun.
then gonna spawn in these lasers that are either ground level or at slide or crouch level. So this
Because of
means
that slide
you then
jump?
have to maneuver.
I don't know,
through
man. I
this
think it's a
maze
lot
of
of fun.
lasers to even get there, and they will practically insta kill you if
Yeah,
you
they will
touch them,
delete
even
you.
for just a second. So you have to
Yeah.
have nearly perfect movement to get down to the bottom of the beach, and it's also on a time crunch. So you have
Yep.
to be very.
This
quick
boss
and
fight's
precise about
easier
it. And
on
then,
solo
once
than
you get
co-op,
into the
though.
stomach, you then have to input a couple of digit code that the selector on it moves really quickly, and if
It's
you miss
really
3
unique.
times,
There's nothing
then
like
it'll
this
kick you
boss.
off. If
It's
you miss
cool.
if you mess it up a couple of times, it'll kick you out of the stomach, and you have to do that sequence again.
Where do the
It's
lasers come
really
from, chat?
unique.
We
Is
do
the
not
best
know.
designed boss fight? Absolutely not, by no stretch of the imagination. But it is
It's very
incredibly
difficult,
unique.
though.
It's just something different. So it's one of those ones
Hey,
that's like
he
you want
got
a nice
it.
mix up. It's a lot of fun to play. After that is going to be what some may not
Oh.
consider to even be a boss fight, but I wanted
Really?
to include it on this list.
I'm shocked you're including Tog. If you're including Tog, I think it goes much lower, because Tog is basically, if you're including Tog, then you should include Origins, because it's the same shit, in my opinion. I don't like Tog's ending, to be honest,
This
in
is the
gameplay.
ending of
It
Togger
sucks.
Toten. Technically speaking, there is
I think it's
no
really
like
bad.
main shoot the guy villain in this one, but it does have a final sequence which involves you staying within this certain area, this orb that transports you all around the map. The map completely changes as well, where all of the water.
I mean, I
then
do like
becomes
that the
lava
map changes,
that
though.
can damage
It's
you,
cool.
and it's incredibly
It is cool.
intense. You get a full map tour,
The
and
best zombies
the
map of
ending
all time.
sequence itself is great.
Kino, Dirt
Again,
Toten, Black
I
Ops.
think
It is
many people
really
were
cool.
expecting to have
It's
an
just-
actual boss for
it's
this map,
like
and
a
obviously,
very
if you know about
Activision
Black
thing,
Ops
though,
4's
like,
history,
escort
that
the
Tundra
payload.
Toten wasn't really supposed to be the
That's
final
the
map for
problem.
this.
It is
gonna be in
hectic.
season
It is
2.
pretty good.
So it's entirely
But
possible
I don't
that
know if
either
I'd put it
they
this
just didn't
high.
have time to make an actual boss for this map, or this was going to be how the map played
We
out. but
deserve the
something
Great
else was
War.
supposed to be
That's why I
the
think it
grand
sucks,
ending.
too.
Either way, I do like the subversion a little bit, where it's like we all expected to have a really grand boss fight, but it ends up being this little sequence where we take this.
But it's
ether
like,
orb
that
back
was
to the
not what it was
facility, and it's
supposed to be.
super
We
simple
all
concept,
know
but
that.
doesn't mean it's easy. I give it
Yeah.
points for being visually really interesting. I mean, honestly, all of this red probably looks just great
Yeah.
on YouTube. but
Dude, look
when you
at that
play it for
bitrate,
yourself,
boys.
it does
Let's
look
go,
really
bro.
good. However,
Look at
it's
that
not
quality.
It's not that hard.
How
Like,
many
it still has
pixels
to-
do you see
still
on
have
the
to stay on your
screenshot?
toes. There is a threat of dying.
It looks
especially
so
at the very
bad
end
on
where the
YouTube
circle pretty much
and on
completely
Twitch.
collapses on you if you don't have anything to cover
It's so
yourself. You'll
sad.
probably die as you have to like survive there for quite a long time. But other than that, it really isn't that hard. It's just a lot of fun. And not to mention, after the sequence is done,
Jeez,
obviously
and the
much of
dying
Togger
wish.
Tone is
Oh
just
my
like an
gosh.
exposition dump. That's many of the steps.
I
And
agree.
even this
It's
ending
Alpha
to some
Omega
degree,
too.
but once you've actually completed this sequence, going out and exploring the rest of the map, as it's so quiet and peaceful, and you can see
It is
this
cool.
just actual visual
It
masterpiece
is a
in front of you
cool
without the distraction.
idea.
Or
I just wish
worrying
there was
about
more of a
zombies
fight,
is amazing,
you
and I
know?
don't think we spent enough time like really letting this soak in, because
Yeah.
pretty much the ending happens directly after. But other than that,
Pablo
great visual
Marinus!
spectacle at the
That's
very
all I remember
end,
this-
and the step itself is pretty interesting, despite it not having a main villain or main boss fight. But other than that, Togger Tone actually gets an above average in my book for its final sequence.
I mean, dude, the
Next
final
up, though,
sequence
we
is
have
pretty
Derizen
cool.
Drox boss fight.
Oh,
And again,
chat!
this is one on
Wow. Okay, so now we're getting into the great ones. DE boss fight. I mean, I knew he wasn't gonna put it near the top, because I don't think DE is near. Like, I think it's a top 10 boss.
3.
But
This
I don't
really
think
started
it's the
out
best
swinging,
by
and
any
this
means.
boss fight is great.
I
It's
don't know,
more
chat. What do you
endemic
guys
of
think
how
about
I feel about the
DE?
map in general, where I basically mentioned if there was ever something that was considered a perfect zombies map, it would be DE. And I would also say this is the perfect boss fight. Is it my favorite or is it the best? No, but it
It's
is
a
nearly perfect from a
well-executed boss
design
fight.
standpoint,
Yeah, I
and it's
agree.
very, very straightforward and simple.
I
It's
remember
about
when
as
streamers were
cookie-cutter
getting
as it gets
deleted
for a
by this
fight, and I'm
homie.
not even saying that as a
You know?
criticism. It's literally a circular arena. You have one center boss that you deal damage to when the conditions are met. Like, you put the Ragnaroks down in the middle when
Do I
it's
still have
sparking,
a crush
and
on
then you
Noah?
just deal
Yeah, dude, I'm
damage to
waiting
the
for him to
keeper.
make
But
that
there's
Call of Duty
panzers
gameplay
thrown in every
tutorial.
once in a while, or other little attacks that the boss will throw at you in
It
between
changed
those
everything, this
sequences
boss
that
fight.
make it
I
more
mean, it's
difficult
true.
to survive.
It does
and
have a
not
lot
as,
of significance
easy
in
as
terms
it
of the
sounds.
community.
Despite it being a simple premise, it can still be a rather challenging boss fight. I mean, there are
It is a
gobble
very
guns and
challenging
certain
boss
setups you
fight
can run
without- when
that
you're not set
completely
up.
break the boss fight, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But it's like there are ways you can play it, and it will always be a genuine challenge. And like,
Plunger
the way
makes it
plays out
easy.
is
I mean, it's hard
always
to get the punches
predictable,
on
and you
DE.
know what you're getting yourself into. Again, super cookie cutter, but extremely effective.
I mean, I'm glad you
Coming
put
up
it
just
up
after
here.
that is going to
Hey,
be Mauer
I do
on
agree.
Cold
Mauer
War, and
does
I
have
think
a better
it's pretty
boss fight.
similar to like
Chat,
DE in
do
the
you
sense
agree that Mauer has a better boss fight than DE? I mean, I can agree with that, to be honest. The Mauer boss fight is fun.
that it's a near
It is a
perfect boss
fun
as well.
fight,
It's
man.
a little bit different in the way that it functions. You don't stay in
It's
one place.
pretty
You have to
difficult, too.
transport
It's
to
not-
basically
it's
the
not
entire
easy.
map
You
as you're
can
fighting
die on
the
this fight.
ethereal version of Valentina.
More
and
stuff
you have
happens
to
in Mauer.
constantly
Yeah,
copper
dude.
shields in order to deal damage.
It's very
and there's basically like
hectic,
5 or
too.
6 different phases of this one. But this boss fight is
I
a
do
lot
agree.
more
It's
interesting
definitely
than
better.
Forsaken. It's way more difficult.
Way
and
more
It
interesting.
can
Yeah, I
genuinely
agree.
be a challenge. I love pretty much everything about this boss fight, from the way the gameplay mechanics work to the actual boss attacks to the visuals. I love
And it's
almost
wild
everything about
because
it.
this is
My
not
only
even the best
criticism
Cold
of
War
Mauer
boss
Kill's
fight either.
boss fight is in between the sequences when you're traveling to a new area. You can pretty much take it at your own pace and go and like get armor and other
That's
stuff. And
so
I get that's kind of
true.
required for the gameplay.
That is so
but
true.
It does reduce the pace a lot, and it kind of
I
feels
agree.
less like
I
a boss
agree.
fight when you're in complete control of the pace.
You
instead
can
of the
literally
boss
just
being in
get
control
ammo
of
and armor
it
all
does
the
deflate
time.
the tension a
I
little bit,
agree.
and I would say that's the only problem I really have with Valentina's
I mean, I
fight.
can fully agree
Also,
with
at
that.
the end, there is a sequence in which you have to transport Klaus all the way to the back of the reactor.
Yeah, that sequence can
and
be
if
a
you're
little
playing
bit
it solo,
boring.
or
It's
you're
kind
just
of
not really paying
unnecessary.
attention, that
You
sequence
can
might
die.
catch you by surprise, and
Yeah.
I would still include that as part of the boss fight itself, and it's pretty
Yeah,
challenging.
that
By no
portion
means is it the most
is
impressive
not that
fight I've
fun.
ever seen, but it's one of Treyarch's stronger boss fights, and
I
if
agree.
iterated a little
I
bit
agree.
more or made slightly more complex and challenging, that kind of concept could be very, very effective. Coming
Yeah.
up above that, though, we're in our
Hey,
pretty high tier boss
let's
fights.
go.
This is going to be another
The
one of
homie
Treyarch's
GK.
stronger examples. This
He's
is
here.
Gorod Krovi on Black Ops
Let's
3,
go.
which I believe to this day, when it comes to Treyarch, is still the least completed Easter egg out of all of them.
I
think
agree.
a lot
I
of
agree. Gorod is, I think, the hardest Easter egg on BL3. One in the chat if you
times
agree.
the reason for that being
And if you don't have any ultra rare megas, like, it's actually a very difficult boss fight. No gobblegums.
is this
very
boss
difficult.
fight in and of itself. You're given a little bit of,
It is very
subversion
difficult.
where
No
you think you're going to be
gobbles.
fighting Mech Nikolai at the beginning, but you actually have to fight off the dragon first
Getting
and
there is
foremost,
hard, too,
and he
yeah.
assists you in doing
It's
so.
definitely the
There's
least
3
completed
sequences
Easter
which
egg.
you have to
I
deal
agree.
damage to the dragon in its weak spots, and they're pretty straightforward, you know, nothing too crazy there. But the dragon is a bit of a threat, and I vividly remember this boss fight at the time being one of the most challenging for teams. It
I
wasn't
do
like
agree.
now it is in Zombies, where the first team to get into the boss fight usually completes it first try.
I mean, with
or at
Cold
least
War, that was
90%
the
of the
case,
time.
yeah.
This was back in BO3, where like you would need to
You
take
would
like 3 or 4, maybe
get
even 5
deleted.
attempts at the boss fight before you
Yeah.
completed it with your team. And while people
I
have
miss that,
figured out
dude.
numerous
I
ways to
miss
cheese
that.
the boss fight now, and you can get
We
through
need
it
more harder
very
bosses
quickly
in
and
Zombies, I
rapidly
agree.
if you know what you're doing, and the sequences themselves can be basically broken if you know what's up. It still
Personal
doesn't take away
Gorod
from the fact
Krovi,
that
baby.
the design is one of Treyarch's best even still. Still regarded widely as one of the most challenging boss fights ever in Zombies by the community as a whole, and I don't
agree.
think that's really ever going to change.
It's
I don't
definitely
have
one
very
of the
much
hardest.
criticism for this boss fight, if at all. I mean, the only thing I would say is that the way you can play it and cheese it is the only thing that might potentially break the experience, but if you play it how it's, I guess, traditionally supposed to be played, it will give you a run for
Chat,
your
I'm
money
in
no matter
Discord,
who you
boys.
are,
Wait,
and it's a
why am I up in the top left? What the heck? Chat, I'm in Discord in here? What's going on?
really good time. So this
We-
is a
we be-
great
we be
example of a
Discord?
good Treyarch boss fight. But up
What's-
next
what's
with
going on
an
up
even
in
better
this
boss
game?
fight that has also a very interesting history.
Dude, chat, is Spaceland's boss fight better than Gorod? I don't know if I agree with that. I think Spaceland's boss fight is hard as hell, so I agree it's near the top.
Backstory is
But I don't know if
Zombies
it's
in
better than
Spaceland,
GK.
and on replay,
It is
because I haven't played
hard
this
as
in a few years,
hell.
Repeating this boss fight, I got absolutely smoked. My
Yeah,
first couple
it took
times
me a
around,
couple attempts
because the
to
boss
get- to
fight
get it,
looks
too.
deceptively easy, but it's
I'd
one
probably
of
stream
the
this map,
most
like,
difficult
15
boss fights
hours to
that
do.
still remain to be tough but fair, right?
It's
like
tough
this
and
boss
fair,
fight
I
is
agree.
a prime
Yeah.
example of the game not just deciding that you've
It
died
is a
just
hard
for any reason.
boss.
It's not artificial. If you made a mistake,
It is
in
one of the
Spaceland,
best
you know
first
exactly
boss
what you
fights
did
in
wrong.
all of
You
Zombies.
essentially
I
have to
agree.
deal
For,
absurd
like, on
amounts
this
of
maps.
damage to an alien, and once you deal enough
He's
damage, you'll
so
have a vulnerable
difficult.
window where you have to melee his back and take a fuse off. That's
Yeah.
a lot easier said than done
Yep.
because the way that Spaceland is laid out and the playable space
Yep.
you have to work with,
It
you
is
don't
a
have that
lot
much room
easier
to
said than
navigate,
done.
and the zombies end up
What's your
being a
stream
massive
schedule? I
threat.
mean, shit, whenever,
Positioning
bro.
and movement
Literally.
is absolutely everything in this fight. In future
Yeah.
Zombie
No
titles,
World War
they
II on
should
the
use
list? No,
Zombie
it's just
Spaceland
IW
as a
trailer.
model to create a boss fight that is difficult difficult and genuinely difficult.
I mean,
but
Lee
still
Ross
fair.
knew what he was,
That being
knew
said,
what he was
however,
doing,
I do
man.
remember
He did
when
a
the
great
game
job.
launched, they actually had to nerf this
They
boss
did have
fight
to
in
nerf
an
this
update
boss.
because
Yeah,
most
it was
people
so
were
hard.
not able to complete this. They would get to the boss fight and just get
He
absolutely
would just
slaughtered. Like, you could try
delete
this
you.
Best
20,
zombies map
maybe
of all
even
time.
30 times on the pre-patch,
Kino
and it was
Black Ops
nearly impossible to beat.
Yeah.
So they had to nerf the boss fight
The
because it was so
pre-patch of
crazy.
this was
But now
so
it's in a
difficult.
really good position. It's been fine-tuned, and it's one of the most fair but challenging boss fights that have ever existed in zombies. Great example and one of my favorite in general. Up
I
next
agree.
is probably my favorite
Hey,
boss fight in Black Ops 4,
Voyage.
but unfortunately is attached to my least favorite
Yeah,
map in the
I
game.
agree. Like I said, I think Voyage has one of the. I think Voyage is a top 10 boss fight.
And this is
It's just
Voyage
the
of
map
Despair's
and the
boss fight.
Easter eggs.
Now, who would have known
suck
behind
so
the
much
absolutely
donkey
horrendous main
dick.
Easter egg quest is an absolute hidden gem, which is the fight against the giant.
Yeah, the
blue
boss
hive. I don't
fight
remember what
is
it's called,
great.
but this is a absolutely phenomenal.
It just
fantastic
sucks that the
fight.
rest of the
you have
shit is
different
so
like
bad.
5 sequences that take you all around the map. It's kind of like Maurid or Toten in that sense, but this one is just a lot more intelligently designed and it's significantly more intense. I will say
best zombies
it's a
map of all
totally
time.
different experience solo versus
Kino
co-op,
Toten
and I
Black
think
Ops.
it's a
Very
great
true as
solo
well.
boss fight. I'm gonna
Yeah,
draw
it's
some
definitely a better
comparisons to
solo
Maurid
than
or Toten's
co-op.
boss fight because of how similar in structure they are.
Yeah,
But in
they're very
Voyage's fight,
similarly
the,
staged.
actual eye and
But
the
there's
boss enemy
more
itself
in
is way
Voyage.
more of a threat than Valentina
100%,
ever is in that map.
100%.
And alongside that, the onslaught of zombies add to the intensity as well. You have a little bit less playable space in this version, and also the boss itself is just designed
Boss can
better
freeze
because it has
you,
a
too.
lot of
It's
like
very
audio
dangerous.
and visual cues that
Yeah.
are very clear and precise.
It's
that
very,
indicate
very
certain
dangerous.
attacks. And
Yeah.
I really like that in boss fights. That you
Chat,
can kind of
I don't think a lot of people have done this Voyage boss. Has one in the chat if you've beaten the Voyage of Despair boss? 2 in the chat if you've never played it.
predict what's coming. It can be
It's
a really
hard,
dangerous
man.
move, but if you know how to respond,
I don't
based
think
on
a
an
lot of
audio
people
or
have beaten
visual
this boss.
indicator, that can
It's
set you
extremely
up in the right
difficult.
direction to beating the boss fight, even if you're not in the best position to do so.
I mean,
Just
I'm a
like
wonder.
Maurid
I've
Toten
done
as
it,
well.
dude.
The boss fight ends
But
where
it's hard.
it begins, but this feels a lot more of a journey than Maurid Toten's boss fight did.
Yeah, I feel like
because
you need
also don't have those
homunculuses as
short
well to
breaks
do
in
this
between where you
boss.
kinda go
At
do
least
whatever
for
you
me,
want.
dude.
It
I
throws you
really
into the
need
next
them to do
sequence
it.
in Voyage, whether you like it or not. And this is one of those examples as well where the visual spectacle matches its gameplay, and I
Oh,
think
100%,
that's why it's
yeah.
so aligned, and that's why it's so fun. However, my main criticism of this boss fight
You
is
do need the
basically
Helion.
only have one way to play it,
Yeah,
especially if you're in solo.
unfortunately.
You literally have to run the Hellion Salvo.
Yeah,
You pretty much
you-
have to
you
have
can't
one of the
play it
wonder
without
weapons
it.
as well. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
you would probably take that in anyways, but you need the launcher. There really isn't
Yeah,
a whole lot
I
of
hate.
weapons
I
you
do
can
hate that
drop
it's a
in
meta
with
boss fight for
besides
sure.
this gun, and I
Yeah.
think that's unfortunate because of Black Ops 4's intended philosophy, where it's like you can kind of
Yeah.
play however you want. That isn't really true in this case, and I think that's my only downfall of it. It's such a shame Black Ops 4 doesn't have like
Yeah.
a boss battle rush mode, because I would play this so much if I didn't have
I
to do that
agree,
dreaded
dude.
Easter egg quest.
It
But
sucks
other
that
than
there
I
isn't one
really
like that
love
on
it. Coming
BO4.
up just above that, though,
And
it
there
was
it
so
is,
difficult
boys,
whether
Legion.
to rank this higher than Voyage or vice versa.
I
but
mean, nah,
ultimately,
dude. I think the Legion boss fight is easily the best boss fight in Cold War, and I do think it's better than Voyage. Dude, the timer is so brutal on this
I'm gonna
boss
have
fight.
to put Legion a
It's
little
so
bit above.
brutal.
And let me just go and explain why this boss fight is so good.
And it's
now, a lot
so
of casual zombie
hard.
players
And there's a
might
lot of
not even
different
know what
metas
this is or
for this
even know
boss
that
as
it
well.
exists. This is the first Easter egg boss
Gonna
fight
make videos
in
with
Outbreak,
Crispy?
the
I
new
mean,
mode
maybe.
that Treyarch brought with Cold War. And Legion, who was our main villain here, is essentially a giant tempest. And while this on the surface may not
Yeah,
seem like the
Legion
most
is more of a
interesting or
villain than
in-depth
the
boss
Forsaken
fight,
guy.
the thing I love about it is it's the opposite of Voyage of Despair in the sense that it's
Just
so
so
sandboxy.
hectic.
You
And
can
it's
literally
sandboxy,
play
yeah.
this
Map of
boss
all
fight
time.
exactly however you want,
Kino
and
Toten
you
Black Ops
will
4.
get the results that you get, basically. So,
Yeah.
for example, there's a really interesting mechanic in this boss fight where if you bring in a wonder weapon like a ray gun, for example, it's going to make the zombie spawns
Yeah,
and
which is
everything
very
else a lot
strange.
more intense than if you didn't.
Yeah.
So you can up the intensity on yourself by just bringing in a certain gun. You can also go in on a really high round to make the boss fight
And
as
also
hard
it's
as
not
possible.
too
And
difficult
you can
to get
change
to
this
it.
to your liking. If you
It's
play
not too
Legion
bad.
on
The
lowest
steps are
round,
quite
on round
easy.
5 without any wonder weapons, it's pretty easy. You
Yeah.
just deal damage to him while he's vulnerable
Round
and break his armor.
22,
Do that in 3
Jesus.
different
That's
sequences by shooting
ridiculous.
these orbs and taking his health down 1/3 at a time.
The bunker
Not to mention
step
the boss fight
is
also
cool.
has a ticking
I
clock
mean, it's on
element, which
Outbreak.
adds a little bit of intensity to it.
It's wild,
It still
dude.
gives you a very generous window.
The
to
steps
beat this,
are better
but it
than
adds a
Voyage
little
as well.
something to the fight.
They're
Treyarch's
a
listening
lot
to this
easier.
in their next project. I hope they expand on this concept and this idea for future boss fights, where make them them this sandboxy and customizable, where the experience
I agree.
genuinely feels different each and every single time.
Yeah, and there's a fun meta towards
scale
it too.
up in difficulty as the boss gets a little more desperate to survive, right? Like when the Legion is down to his last bar of health, for example, give him some attacks that are incredibly unique and devastating. If you
Dude,
don't
like
dodge them,
Meph.
see them
Yeah,
coming and
that's where
react to
Meph
them.
is
This
so
boss
perfect.
fight is absolutely
Meph
phenomenal.
is just
other than that,
amazing
and
for
it's
that.
one of my favorites to play in zombies in general. I would even go so far as to say Legion should now be the base model that they expand on the idea of for future boss fights.
I agree.
Similar to, like,
I
DE
agree.
was a very
Yeah.
cookie cutter boss fight for
Legion
BO3,
was the
and they
best
really
modern
kind of played
zombies
around
boss
with that general
so far.
structure for those fights. They should do the same thing with Legion and expand
class
on
you
that
run for
further,
Legion?
because it could be so much more.
I mean,
although
I like
Legion
running
in
the
and of itself
M16,
is one
but
of
the
my
Tech
favorite
9
boss
here is
fights just in
insane.
gaming, not purely for zombies, but it is amazing if you've never
There's
played
a
it.
lot of
But
different
finally,
guns you can
taking
run.
the throne as
Hey!
the number 1 best boss fight in zombies,
Let's
and
go!
perhaps one of the best
Let's
boss
go!
fights in just gaming as a whole is the Mephistopheles fight in Infinite
I agree.
Warfare.
Mephistopheles is like the only boss in zombies that does feel like Elden Ring. And like, dude, I've made so many videos about this boss recently because I feel like not enough people know how good it is.
This
But
boss
it's
fight is
great,
literally the
man.
definition of sauce. It's everything
It's-
you can want
it's
and possibly
so
much
difficult.
more. And do you remember when I said at the beginning of the video that the Beast from Beyond really felt slapped together and just kind of like they cobbled it together in 1 second? Well, the reason for that is because
this
for the
fight
most
made
part,
me
the
do it
team
for
was
the Vine.
developing
I mean,
this boss
true.
fight. And if you've played Infinite Warfare, you do that map's Easter egg. The boss fight you're thrown into directly after the cryptids is Mephistopheles. So it's pretty clear
this
that
boss
they
fight gives
focused on
me
this one
anxiety,
primarily,
man.
while the other one was a little bit
It's
of
like
a
Elden
smokescreen
Ring.
or a red
It gives me
herring.
anxiety.
This boss fight, however, the structure is perfect.
And it's so
The way it works is
ironic.
you have to stand and
It's so ironic that the best zombies boss is literally Satan. Still haven't beaten it. I still have, chat. I made a video on my
different
channel.
rings
Go
while
check
these
it out.
talismans fill up.
My
They
main
only
channel.
fill up while you're standing in them, so it's like a time thing.
Such an
And
amazing boss,
Mephistopheles
man.
has a large number of different attacks that most of them will just straight up insta-kill you.
I agree.
But the difference is, the reason it doesn't feel unfair, they're highly reactable.
I just hate that this boss, you have to basically do the entire Beast from Beyond Easter egg to do it legit, or you can do the boss rush mode.
what's coming. So
But I
as
mean,
you
like,
play the
dude,
fight
to
more
do
and
it
more, you're gonna
legit
learn
sucks,
exactly what
man.
to avoid, how to avoid it, and then how to play against it.
Will
And
you
then
play
also
Elden
in
Ring again?
between,
I
while
probably
filling
will,
up
man.
these rings, you're given every single enemy
I really
to
want
fight
a
in
new
the game in these
Elden
different
Ring sequel
ways,
to
and
come
they
out,
serve
man.
as a
A
little bit
sequel
of
to
a
that game
change
would
of
be
pace
amazing.
from just filling up the rings themselves and doing the talismans, and then you also have to deal damage to Mephistopheles himself in between.
Dude,
each
also
of
the
these
cryptids on this
sequences.
fight
assuming you
are
even
so
make it that far,
difficult.
which is a stretch,
Yeah.
and especially playing solo is very difficult to do.
This boss
When you
fight
get to the end
solo
of the
is
talismans,
impossible.
You then have to do a
So
really
hard.
large sequence of dealing tons of damage to Mephistopheles himself while he spawns literally everything in the game at the same time. I'm
Yeah.
surprised the game doesn't crash with how much he spawns
True.
at that final phase.
True.
But it's
I mean,
everything
true.
condensed of what I love in a boss fight. It's brutal, it's
Fill the rings?
unforgiving,
Elden
it's
Ring?
tough, but it's fair. And
mean, this
every
is
time
Elden
you
Ring
play
boss
it's
fight.
not
It
like
really
you don't
is.
feel discouraged after you lose. You want to go back in and try again because you learned something new, or you
Yeah.
figured out a different strategy that might help you a little bit better.
And
It's
chat,
also
I remember, like I said, you know it's a good boss fight when it took a week for someone to beat solo.
worth noting
that
that
is
you
the other
can't
thing.
really break this boss fight. Like there's a
You
lot
no,
of
you,
especially
there's
like BO3 and
no
BO4 and stuff that,
special
depending-
fixes. The only ways you can maximize this fight is literally just by luck. It just by skipping
depending on
animations.
what you run in terms of your loadout
Yeah.
and equipment,
It's
it
very
completely changes the way the boss
luck-based.
fight plays. But you can run essentially whatever you want in Mephistopheles, and it's still going to give you a challenge. There is
Yeah.
no way to cheese it.
Yeah, I
You're
agree.
in it for the long haul, no matter
No
what
cheese.
you run. But it's up to your preference and exactly your personal skill at the end
Yeah,
of the
it's
day.
a no
I
cheese
absolutely
boss.
adore this boss fight, and I cannot stress it enough. If you've never played it, I highly recommend you do. If you have access to Infinite Warfare, this is a good reason to go and play it.
Yeah, the
If you
fake
haven't,
cards
but
as well
I
don't
hope
even make it OP. It's not like Gobblegums where you just run near death in the GK boss fight and you're okay.
they do
Not
more
this
stuff like this in
boss.
zombies. This
There's
is what we
nothing
need.
good
it's maybe
enough
not
that can
the
cheese
most
it.
beginner friendly. Obviously, I don't want it in a long
Oh, absolutely
but as
not.
a series finale, this was literally perfect, and I really
Yeah,
do
it was
hope
a
they iterate
great
on
boss.
something like this. But anyways, guys, that is my list of the
This
best
was
boss
the true ether ending boss as far
fights
as
in
I'm
Call of Duty
concerned,
Zombies
boys.
Rank. Let me
Great
know your
video,
thoughts on my
boys.
list down below in the
Drake's in
comment
the
section if
chat.
you agree, if you
Great
disagree.
video.
I would love to hear
Yeah,
from
you need
guys. But
everything to
anyways,
even have a
drop like if
chance
you
on
enjoyed
this
the video.
boss.
This is a really long time
Seriously.
to make, and be sure
Great
to
video.
subscribe for
And the music was great.